The BRICS summit adopted a document on the principles of the group's expansion. This means that BRICS as it is now will no longer exist. BRICS. These 5 letters are taken from the names of the countries that make up BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And the association plans to expand. And before we begin, I'll ask you to subscribe to the channel if you like the video and also put a like and write a comment. Be sure to watch the video to the end. There I will tell you all the truth about Vladimir Putin, which you must know. So watch the video to the end. Some of the disagreements that were within BRICS over the expansion of the group have been settled. BRICS leaders have agreed on a document that outlines the principles of admitting new countries into the group. The document, which defines the principles and conditions, as well as the process for countries that would like to become BRICS members, has been approved, the report said. Political observer Dmitry Kozyrev pointed out that a long and hard work will now begin. More than 20 countries want to join BRICS, and this raises a lot of questions that require concrete solutions. Consensus used to be the rule, but the consensus of more than 24 countries is difficult, and it is not enough to force someone to do it, as it happens in NATO or the EU. And if we vote, how should we vote? Should we demand a simple majority or 2/3? Kozyrev argues. For 15 years, BRICS has been a club of the world elite. Kozyrev explained that the general idea was that behind each of the 5 BRICS members was some region, some group of countries that recognized the fact that it was the central, systemically important part of this or that region. What will happen now is unclear. Should we leave the veto power to the 5 founders? That wouldn't please everyone else, says the columnist. But one way or another, the process has been set in motion. We are now talking about creating a new structure for the world economy and politics. BRICS has done its job. It launched this process 15 years ago, and now it can leave, or rather, turn into something more voluminous and influential. In fact, into the central supporting structure of the new world order. Kozyrev specifies. Speaking of the word BRICS, there is a version that the association will no longer be called so. As it was said above, BRICS. These 5 letters are taken from the names of the countries included in it: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And the web is now wondering, what will BRICS be called? BRICS plus Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE. BRICS. They're suggesting on the web. But these are already nuances. More important is another. One of the main roles in BRICS is played by Russia, without which this bloc would never have the image of strength. Against the backdrop of the SWO, the BRICS summit itself is perceived as a challenge by Moscow to U.S. hegemony. That is why 22 countries have applied to join BRICS, and about 20 more countries are ready to follow suit. And that is why the U.S. has organized a preemptive strike. Even long before the current summit, the U.S. has made numerous attempts. The leaders of India, Brazil, as BRICS member countries, and the Arab world were defiantly invited to international summits and meetings organized by the U.S. The G7 summit in Hiroshima, where the president of Brazil and the prime minister of India were invited as guests, was characteristic. But the trick failed. Neither did the trick with the arrest warrant for Putin issued by the ICC. The West was counting on the fact that the absence of the Russian president at the meeting would nullify its effectiveness. But the Russian president spoke via video conference, and his speech was met with applause. I must assure you that President Putin's active participation in discussing the issues on the summit agenda is appreciated by all other BRICS leaders, and it is very effective. It feels like the Russian leader is present in the summit meeting room side by side with other BRICS leaders, said South African foreign policy spokesman Nelson Kwete. Thus, the main trends of the BRICS can be called the imminent expansion of BRICS to 20 to 30 countries in the very next few years. De-dollarization of economic relations within the BRICS. Weakening of the U.S. leverage to put pressure on international trade. In other words, the BRICS has many tasks. All of them will be gradually solved. And, of course, let us not forget that the next BRICS summit will be held in Russia, in Kazan, which has already been announced by Vladimir Putin. The dominance of the dollar in the reserves of central banks is weakening, writes Haber 7. In 1999, the share of the U.S. currency in world reserves was 71%, and in the intervening years it has fallen to 59%. There will be nothing left of the dollar. Rejoice the Turks. Dollar. though, and remains the leading reserve currency, but according to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, gradually increasing its position in the world currency reserves non-traditional currency. According to researchers at the Brookings Institution, there are several problems threatening the dollar's leading position in financial markets. The share fell from 71% to 59%. The use of the dollar has been steadily declining over the past decades. IMF data show that the dollar accounted for 59% of all global reserves in early 2024, down from 71% in 1999. Meanwhile, the share of non-traditional currency reserves has grown. Such currency as Australian dollar, Swiss franc, Chinese yuan, in the beginning of the current year amounted to 11% of all reserves of central banks. Then as in 1999, only 2%. The shares of currencies in world reserves were distributed as follows. Yuan, China 2%. Swiss franc, Switzerland 1.5%. Canadian dollar, Canada 2%. Australian dollar, Australia 5%. Other currencies, various countries, 3%. Investors are concerned about the dollar. This drop has caused investors to fear that the dollar may soon lose its leading position in the financial markets. According to Business Insider, while most experts say this is unlikely to happen soon, the Brookings Institution said the dollar's dominance faces some important challenges. Experts point to 4 factors. Countries moving away from the dollar. After the Russia-Ukraine conflict began in 2022, the U.S. began imposing sanctions against Russia and its allies. This triggered a trend to reduce the use of the dollar in Russia and other BRICS countries. These countries have announced their intention to abandon the U.S. currency in response to trade restrictions from the West. Russia has moved to an alternative payment system. Russia, in particular, has taken steps to significantly de-dollarize its economy. For example, it has determined the exchange rate of the yuan to the ruble, proposed an alternative currency, and proposed a payment platform that will not depend on the dollar. According to the Bank of Russia, the share of dollar assets in the country's reserves increased from 40% to 46% in 2016 to 2017 and decreased from 22% to 16% in 2020 to 2021. The yuan was not among the reserve currencies in 2016, while in 2020 to 2021 its share in Russian reserves increased from 12% to 13%. Russia is not the only country taking steps toward de-dollarization. China, whose companies were subjected to secondary sanctions by the U.S. Treasury Department last week, has also signaled a move away from the dollar, promoting the yuan as an alternative. In 2014, about 79% of China's foreign exchange reserves were denominated in dollars, but that share has fallen to 60% by the 2020s. Researchers at the Brookings Institution, citing statements by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, commented, "If the U.S. continues to be arbitrary with sanctions, acts unilaterally, and fails to develop a doctrine of economic governance, the dollar could be toppled from its pedestal. Growing U.S. debt load is dangerous for the dollar. The growing U.S. debt load may make currency holders cautious about the dollar, especially if there are concerns that the U.S. will not be able to pay its debts. Although the U.S. government debt has surpassed $35 trillion for the first time, the debt balance has not yet reached unsustainable levels. On the other hand, the rapid pace of government spending has done little to improve markets. For example, Fitch downgraded the U.S. credit rating last year, citing persistent deterioration in governance standards. Disputes over appropriations have led to several congressional shutdowns of the government. Further political instability could undermine investor confidence in the dollar, the researchers said. The Congressional Budget Office projects that the U.S. national debt will exceed $56 trillion by 2034. Payment technologies are improving. Better payment systems have made it easier to transact using non-traditional currencies. It is argued that this could reduce demand for the dollar. Normally, converting such currencies into dollars and vice versa has been easier and cheaper. But China and India, for example, will soon no longer have to exchange their currencies into dollars to trade with each other. Instead, it will be cheaper to directly exchange yuan for rupees. Consequently, reliance on intermediary currencies, particularly the dollar, will diminish, expects Ishwar Prasad, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Rise of digital currencies, CBDCs, issued by central banks could also make non-traditional currencies easier and cheaper to circulate. China is developing CBDCs, and China's CIPS cross-border interbank payment system has grown rapidly over the past few years, the Brookings Institution notes. The U.S. Federal Reserve has established its own instant payments network, but has made no move to create a CBDC. Powell suggested last year that a digital currency would require approval from lawmakers. This means the U.S. risks falling behind other countries where digital payment technology is rapidly advancing. However, despite the warnings, most currency experts do not believe that de-dollarization poses a short-term threat to the U.S. or its currency. At the moment, the dollar has no close competitors in the financial markets. Plus, countries that try to abandon the dollar could face a number of economic consequences, such as slower growth and loss of investment appeal. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Please subscribe to the channel, put a like, and write in the comments what you think about it, so you help my channel to develop.